And welcome to the digits part 4 practice WOD, and we're going to wire up the add contact page, which is right here, so that it actually works, that when we press submit we get the correct behavior. Make sure that you've got your final version of your previous WOD in master, and if you're switching branches, I always recommend that you reset the database, quit Meteor, reset the database, and re-invoke. So that you don't have strange errors. Also, we're going to be using Meteor Example Form as the template now, so be sure to download this code to your app, and I would suggest you bring it up and run it, make sure that's fine, and then create an IntelliJ project so you can easily cut and paste code between the two applications. You're going to see me do that. Okay, so let's start by starting the timer. And we're going to create an add contact branch off of master. I'm going to call this add contact 2 because I think I already have an add contact 1. And then I'm going to remove auto publish because when we're doing forms, we don't want auto publish. It tends to create spurious errors. So we'll do a Meteor remove auto publish. We had to quit the app first. Okay, we moved it. And now I'll do a I guess I'll maybe do, we don't really need to do this again, but we can do this again. So I'm going to invoke that. Let's get Meteor started again. And while that's doing that, I'm going to add my publication to import startup server. So to do that, let's go to Meteor Example Form, and we can notice in import startup server, we've got a publications.js file, which is importing the student data from the form. Let's just do that. Let's just use that same thing for digits. So in import startup server, let's create a file called publications.js, and we'll put in that file this same code. Well, we'll start with that same code. But of course we don't want student data, we want contacts. So we'll replace that. And then we'll publish contacts in this way. Okay, so we should see no errors, and then we got to update our index.js so that we are publishing publications. Otherwise, we won't see the publication. It won't be loaded. Okay, so let's go back and see how we're doing here. So it appears to have restarted, and we can go here, refresh. Things look reasonable. If we look at the console, we don't see any problems. So it looks like we're doing our publication. Of course, we're not, actually gathering any data from the database at this point. Actually, so if we go to, if we go to home page, we can see actually there isn't data, and that's because we're not subscribing in that page. So let's go ahead and fix that. The easiest way to fix that is to take a look at Meteor Example Form and look at the let's try the edit student data page, and we can see the on created. We have this.autorun to subscribe. So let's, in fact, I don't know that there's an on created. Let's just copy this whole thing, go back to digits, go back to homepage.js. See, there's no onCreated template hook function. So we'll just create one, homepage, onCreated. Get rid of this stuff because that's not relevant to this page. And add a new line. And then function onCreated, we're going to subscribe to contacts. Okay, so let's save that out. And let's wait for this page to be refreshed. Okay, so we've gotten rid of auto-publish, but now we've created a publication called contacts, and we've got our home page subscribing to that, so now we've got our data in our home page just the way we want it to. Okay, so we did that. So now we want to use the createStudentPage.html for meter example form. We're going to update add contact page so that the form's HTML is appropriate for form submission. Okay, so let's start by looking at the create student data page HTML. And the first thing we're going to see here is that this UI form field has some helpers in it, a success class and an error class. And so let's copy that, go back to digits, and in our add contact page, we'll update our UI form. Now we don't really need a success class because on success for this we're just going to go right back to the home page. But we do need a class in here to indicate when the submit button is pushed to find that particular event. So we're going to keep that class in there just for the purposes of our selector in the event. And we will need error class to display errors. So let's go back to meteor example form. And then we'll notice that for each of these we have we need a type field, a name, an ID, and a placeholder. And if we go back to digits, we can see there's no ID for these. So let's add in an ID field that's going to have the same value as the name field. And we'll just put those in there, and IntelliJ helpfully tells us that if you're going to have ID fields, they need to be unique, so that's why we're getting those errors there. Telephone and email. Okay, so that's good. And now if we go back to meteor example form, the next thing we notice is that we need to have these divs that are inserted when a field is not validated. So let's copy that, go back to digits, and then we'll just insert beneath each of our input fields this display field error, because all of these are required in this sample application. But now we need to update the field that we're referring to refer appropriately to the field. So I'll do all that, and then email. But then I guess the error message would be nice. You must specify your first name. You must specify your last name. You must specify your address, your telephone, and your email. Okay. So that gets all those display fields in there. And then if we go down, we don't have a success message, and the submit looks okay. So that's probably, hopefully, all we need to update in the HTML. We'll see when we test it. So we can save that out. And then, let's see. So now we've got to change our JavaScript, okay, to provide the helpers and events and so forth. And we're going to use the example form as the template for that. So now let's go to add contact page.js, and we see we have Zippo in there. If we go to create student data page.js, what I think we'll do here is I'm just going to copy this whole thing and paste it into digits, and then we'll go through it line by line and just fix it up for our current purposes. So instead of student data, the collection that we're dealing with is contacts, and instead of the schema, student data schema, we can see we've got a schema. We've got a schema called contact schema. So we're going to import those two things, but they're from actually contacts.js. So we'll get those two values out of there. And now we see we haven't used them yet, so we're getting those error messages. We're not doing anything on success, but we will display error messages, so we can get rid of that. And then the next thing we need to worry about is making sure that these template helpers are named correctly. So let's make sure, since we've cut and pasted from our template code, let's update these right away, because things will not work good if they're not the right template helper. Okay, so on created, well, we want to create this reactive dictionary to hold our to indicate when we've got error messages to display, and we need a context for validation, and we'll attach it to our the contact schema, which is the way it's supposed to be, and then we will say the name of this is add contact page, so that the name of the context for schema validation is the same as the template name. I think that's just a good kind of heuristic. We're not going to need to figure out whether or not it was successful or not, so we can get rid of both of those things. We do need to know whether or not there was an error, and then we're passing in a field name, so that code basically works just as it is. On rendered, we're not using drop-downs, checkboxes, or radios. So what I'll do for now is let's just comment that out. And normally I don't like commented out code, but the reason why I think it's kind of interesting to do it here is because if in future we're going to extend that form to include a drop-down or a checkbox or a radio button, then we'll come across this code and it'll kind of remind us, oh my gosh, you know, I've got to include this stuff in the event that I'm adding that. So I don't know, it's personal preference. Maybe you just want to delete that, but in some ways it's kind of nice to keep it around. Okay, now we get to the submit. This needs to be contact data form, because in our HTML, remember, we said contact data form. And so we got first, last, address, telephone, and email, and all of those are they're just like this text field. And so what we can do basically is get rid of all these other ones and then duplicate that 4 more times and say first equals first.value, last equals last.value, address equals address.value, telephone equals telephone.value, and email equals email.value. And then we'll say new contact equals first, last, address, telephone, and email. So we're creating a little object here which contains the fields from our form, and then we'll reset validation, and then we'll say contacts schema clean new contact, and then we're going to validate that against the schema, and if it is valid, then we'll say contacts.insert new contact, and then we don't worry about success messages, and we can put our other messages to false. And then what we did want to do is, let's see here. If we go back here, we want to use flowrouter.go homepage in the event that things succeeded. So we can say flowrouter.go homepage, and then this ID is never used because we don't have that success message. So in fact, we can just do that. And then we need flowrouter and an import of flowrouter. So what I generally do is kind of look around to see if I can find a flowrouter definition in some previous code. It turns out that here's an import of flowrouter from the form, and so we can add it in here. And with any luck, ESLint is now happy. That's always a great thing. Okay, so we've got our HTML updated. We've got our JS updated. We're redirecting to the home page. So let's see. So it's restarted, and let's go to add contact. First, let's try a submit. Okay, that's good. We need all of these fields, so we could say, who should we say? Edo Biagioni, address, post, building, telephone 956-78888, email esb@hawaii.edu. So let's try submitting that, and voila, we get that submitted just fine. So that's that looks pretty good. So let's commit our changes to GitHub like this. So finished create page, and we'll call that about 17 minutes. And hope you have fun with that.